is Marla Hunter, and I am one of the people on the leadership team for AIELOC. And we just want to take the time to welcome you today. And so glad that we are able to provide such quality webinars for you all. Today, we will be presenting on the topic Racism in International Schools. Let's start educating parents. And it's by Heidi. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the question box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for questions at the end. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Heidi.
Well, thank you so much, Marla. Thank you. I really want to thank the Association of Educators and Leaders of Color for asking me to be a part of this. This is a good discussion. So as we move through today's discussion, we'll talk about mission statements, parent concerns, educating and involving parents, and ways we can move beyond the conversation into actual action. So many years ago, in 1975, my parents moved from North America to Botswana. I didn't think much of it at the time because I was only 8 years old and I was with my family. But when I was 10, I fell in love, as only a 10-year-old girl can do. I remember thinking about the fact that the boy I liked was Black. And I asked my parents if it was all right for me to love a Black boy. Now you have to remember, I was in Botswana, which borders South Africa, the very center of apartheid at that time. So my question was a reflection of what was going on around me. What strikes me to this day is the answer my parents gave me when they said, "Isn't he a person too?" This amazing gift from my parents was the beginning of my journey. Now, many years later, when my husband and I hired staff for a brand new secondary school, we were congratulated by an accrediting institution on how diverse our staff was. I was pleased, of course, but also surprised. Isn't this the very basis of an international school? But because I had grown up with educators from different countries and ethnicities since grade school, this was a given for me. And this is where my white privilege comes in. I didn't have to think about it. It was only when school parents became very vocal and disrespectful to my staff did I realize we had a problem and we had left out an important message to the parents, which brings us to today's discussion. So if we start by looking at our mission statements, these are beautiful. They're everything we want to be. We want to embrace diversity, be international, have global citizenship, adaptable, empathetic, be inclusive, and respect differences. They represent the best of us in theory. The problem, of course, comes in putting these beautiful ideas into practice and some of the assumptions that we make. We have little standalone lessons for our children, but we've overlooked the biggest group of partners in education, our parents, because we assume that they already agree with our mission statement ideals. In other words, because parents want their children at an international school, we assume that our ideas of international education and theirs are the same. And in some regards, they are. For example, parents want quality education for their children, and international schools provide curriculum that has been approved by accreditation organizations. Parents want their children to learn English, and many schools are English medium with English language learning support. Parents want their children to attend university overseas, and we provide college counseling. But one area where there is a difference, of course, is our hiring practices. Again, our hiring policies are beautiful. Many are written to be as inclusive as possible without bias towards gender, race, ethnicity, color, so forth. But this is where practice is different. I do want to say that there are many schools doing a wonderful job of hiring educators based on qualifications, not ethnicity or color. However, most often, the standard practice has been to hire white English speakers, especially for the core subject areas. I think it's important to look at parent concerns, some of which I have listed here. In one instance, a parent complained about her child having a teacher of color. The administration quickly switched the child's homeroom to another, which had a white teacher. As far as the school was concerned, case was closed. But this is such a horrifying example of racism against a teacher who is extremely qualified and gifted. Because racism is such an emotional topic, charging someone of racist behavior is an explosive accusation, and it's rarely confronted. Instead, it's often hidden away or excused with statements such as, "Oh, they're just not ready for a Black person as a teacher, but give them time, they'll learn." But if we don't take the time to look at those concerns and confront that racism and educate our parents, then the chance and opportunity to change is negligible. If we discover that parents have had a previous bad experience, a misunderstanding, or fear, we can address it. But this also means hard conversations, speaking very frankly about racism. Administrators talk about teachers being a good fit for schools, and we have to look at the parents' fit for our schools. This is hard and it's scary. Many of our schools are tuition-based and we need students. But instead of appeasing the parents, we need to educate the parents. And these tough conversations are vital. It's so important that they understand and support the most fundamental aspect of an international school. Situations like the one I mentioned are shameful, especially in light of our mission statements and hiring policies. As I said, there is an assumption that parents are like-minded because their children attend our school. But we need to be intentional about our ideals, just as we are intentional about sharing our programs. Our workshops for parents usually focus on explaining a type of curriculum or learning English, but we omit our ideology and values and policies when it comes to whom we hire. We need to include parents in workshops and parent sessions about what it means to be an international school. Personally, I would like to see that one of the requirements for student admission is for parents to attend a workshop on diversity and implicit bias. Additionally, educating our parents cannot be part of a checklist that we just tick off and then that's done. It needs to happen over and over again. It's a continual part of who we are and what we do. So how do we start? Generally speaking, parents at international schools are highly involved. We rely on them to chaperone field trips, read to children, and run teacher-parent associations, just to name a few. And of course, they're thrilled to help out with International Day. So let's start there. I suggest moving beyond the usual flags and food and national dress and using a theme to go deeper into countries and cultures. By learning more about these countries, our curiosity and interest grow into real learning and not just a fun day at school. This can happen at the primary elementary level as well, not just the upper grades. Another suggestion is to have parent buddies, or perhaps a grade level adopts a teacher from another country. And we know the importance of building relationships and how this can change attitudes and prejudices. I also think it's important to discover our similarities, not just celebrate differences. Of course, it's interesting to see how we're different, but just as interesting to see how we're similar. One of my staff was a Muslim from Malaysia, but very few people realized he was Muslim. They only saw that he looked Oriental. In the second year of his contract, he participated in a meal and recited the prayers with the host family. And it was only then that people looked beyond his color and ethnicity and realized he was the same as they were. The warm welcome that was extended to him as a fellow believer was very touching. But wouldn't this have been better if the welcome had come no matter the color or ethnicity? So in this next part of the discussion, Marla, I'll hand this back over to you. I believe we'll move into breakout rooms. I have some starter questions. The focus should be on how we can move beyond conversation into action. not just focusing on the bad experiences that we have happened. So I look forward to being part of this discussion and hearing more from you and how we can grow in this together. And if you have further questions, of course, please contact me or the Association of Educators and Leaders of Color as well. So Marla, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, so because we're such small in number, we won't really do a breakout room per se.
Okay.
So what I want you all to do is take the time to think about these questions. And then we'll just have a light discussion about everything that it is that Heidi went over, and also these questions as well. So again, so if you can see on the screen, we're looking for ideas, suggestions, questions, and or concerns. What makes you as an individual uncomfortable? Where is your school, if you're at a school, or your organization with this issue? Have they made a stance on being anti-racist? And if they have they devised a plan? If they have not, are they still devising a plan on how they're going to take a stance on being anti-racist? How are parents being involved? What commitments have I made, or what actions am I taking? And where do I need support? So I'll give you all some time to think about that, because those are a lot of questions. And those are some things that honestly we need some time to think about, to make sure that we're comfortable with everything it is that we may be saying and or thinking. So go ahead. And if
training, diversity, equity, inclusion training for parents, I'm imagining the pushback. And I, my kids are in a public school system, so I can only imagine that pushback would be greater in a private system where parents are paying customers.
Right.
So, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to describe what my public school district is doing along these lines, because they're definitely, they have taken a very strong anti-racist stance as of 3 or 4 years ago, when the new superintendent came on board, and they have a plan, and they have been. I'm in the state of Maine, on the East Coast of the U.S., and they've been actively, very actively, reforming the curriculum to include Indigenous history, to Indigenous knowledge and history into the curriculum. And they really, this was their starting place, and they have acknowledged that they have a lot of curricular reform to do when it comes to teaching slavery and the history of the slave trade, and to ensuring, to working through the system, and really like reconfiguring things from a DEI standpoint across the board. But one thing that I really love about what they've done is what they call Parent University. And it's a great program that is available to parents K through 12, and it touches on any, like a real range of topics. So anything that is of importance to the parent community, recognizing parents as key stakeholders, key constituents, right? And frankly, now in pandemic times, as truly as co-teachers, right? And offering an education to parents in this. I also think of it as a very generous offering. It's takes place about once a month. It's a 2-hour session, very intensive, with snacks. But with a great, they bring in groups to do it's professional development, but for parents, right? To do the PD who are absolute experts in their fields, and who really create an immersive experience, so that it's not, so that essentially parents, you know, are being educated as their students would be educated, and so they're being made to, they're being, you know, invited into the subject matter, in a, on the one hand, it's sort of being modeled for them. This is what we're doing with your students. This is the type of work we're doing with your students, and we're going to show you what it looks like and feels like. And on the other, they're, you know, making true partners of the parents. And I like that model a lot. I feel like it's been quite successful in helping to plant seeds to actually
of change,
spread real change, you know, systemic change. So
yeah.
Wanted to do that.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's excellent. It's so good to hear that that type of thing is happening also.
Thank you, Meadow.
Heidi, do you have any examples? Hi, I'm Brittany. I'm actually also living in the United States right now, but I'm like you, a product of the international school education system in various parts of the world. Do you know of any examples of schools that are implementing any of these parent programs right now? And
no, unfortunately, I don't. That's part of the, I believe, part of the problem. I really, and I think that's what started this whole, I need to write about this because we're missing such a huge chunk. I would like to see it implemented. I'd like to be part of that implementation. So I'm really encouraged by what Meadow has to say too. But no, I am not aware of any. Are you? Do you know, or does anybody else?
I mean, I have actually, I mean, in my role, I work for the International Educator. There has been a lot of discussion, obviously, I'd love to hear from some of the other people on the call as well, from other educators in different international schools, school heads. There's a lot of discussion on boards right now about things that can happen, a lot of the changes that are happening. Obviously, Kevin and his team of people, and Marla as well, the team are working with accreditation agencies as well, and trying to make change in a multi-pronged approach, correct? So recruiting, accreditation across the board, and that's obviously stirring the pot for people at the board level. So I know that there are conversations being had in boards. I was just wondering if there was any examples, because, you know, it would be great to kind of showcase some case studies, or and obviously Meadow talked about one inside the United States in a public school system. How does that pivot, or things like the ideas, some of those ideas? I'd love to see that. Go back to one of your screens actually to go through the list of some of your suggested implementations. I don't know if we can do that, but and if you had done thinking around, you know, if boards are asking, I've had a couple of people just that happen to know that are sitting on boards of schools that are like, what are some of the things that we should be thinking about in terms of change? And I know that one of the biggest flags that always comes up are excuses, and we've even heard it within the context of a lot of these AIELOC webinars as we've been moving forward, is that, you know, but this is what the parents want and we're selling a product. And so obviously I think this is a conversation which will grow and continue. I'm glad that it's been spearheaded here. But I do feel like it would be great to think through some of these professional development for parents and things like Meadow was talking about. What would that look like? What does it look like in the context of being conditional or ongoing, or you know, obligatory? I know that a lot of these schools have waiting lists to get in. This is their cherished positions. So making people, they jump through a lot of hoops to get their position. The kids are sitting through exams, there's assessments, there's a lot of things. So is it in that spirit of you know, so I don't know if you could speak a little bit more in detail about some of these ideas that you've thought through, or if you've ever seen them implemented, if not, you know, in the context of social justice, if in any other context have you seen this kind of work?
Well, in my experience, hiring people of color, different ethnicities, seems to have been a fluke. I don't know how much thought has been given to that in terms of, oh, we don't want this to be a North American school. Like I said, I have not seen that it's been intentional across the board. Like I said, it seems to be more of a fluke that happened. We just happened to get somebody from Malaysia. We just happened to have a white South African. For me, I like the idea that it's part and parcel of an admission process, but not just one more hoop, but like Meadow was saying, more of an educational process. And really, this is what we believe here. We promote this a little to our children, but we never give them a chance to actually live it by having those other experiences with people of color or different accents.
So, Brittany, you were asking if you know if any of us know of any place. So actually, I'm working with ASA, which is the Association of American Schools in South America. So I will be doing a series of webinars with them starting this month, and it's layering them. So this month we're talking about more so distance learning within education, and I'm introducing the DEI approach with them with the distance learning. But then the next one that I'm doing, and again, it's a 4-week webinar series that is on DEI in the elementary and early childhood setting. And so with that, I am going over teachers with how to have these mini PD sessions with their parents.
Oh, great.
And also how to develop lesson plans and curriculum to be done within the classroom. So because this is an org-wide thing, so you have different teachers from different schools, international schools in South America, they are able to take back what they've done back to their schools, back to the directors, and put these things into action. So hopefully, the whole thing of having these parent sessions, whether they are digital or not, because some of the schools are going back and some of them aren't, they will start being had based off these series that I am doing with them.
Good.
Well, so great to hear that, Marla. We'll make sure to get a list of those webinars so we can promote them on our TIE calendar. And
the thing with this is that you have to
be a member, yeah.
You have to be a member of it.
I understand, but we still do try and promote all of the regional association webinars, because most people who are working within their particular regions are members of their associations, which is great.
Exactly. So what I can do is after this, I will send you the links to everything as well.
Great, thank you so much.
No problem.
I would just like to say that this is very helpful, because I just came back to the States after living and working in Malaysia for 5 years. So I initially was there for 3 years working actually with their ministry in government schools on projects. So I was doing like project program management in 2 different programs with their government schools there. But have started to do some consulting work, and I'm now, actually Kevin and I are in the process of collaborating with someone that I was working with as a consultant before I had left. And he does a lot of work with recruitment and a lot of work with international schools. Now, this is kind of interesting because this is helpful, because Malaysia is at a point where the I know from colleagues of mine that had gone from working in the projects I had with the international schools, one of my close Canadian colleagues then became a head of an international school there. And this was the biggest problem that she had, was the school owners and the parents about, oh, well, parents want white, they want them from an English first language country. She heard all of that, which to her was very horrifying. Wasn't the way that she felt with that. But I think that the international schools in Malaysia are going to be forced into this more. The ministry is very much going to start limiting the amount of these teachers that are coming from, these white teachers coming from English first language countries. They really want to start limiting that. They really want to start using local talent. And I myself have worked alongside, just because of the nature of what I did when I was there, with many, many talented Malaysian educators. I actually went on and did a smaller project in Indonesia with one of these women. She's Malaysian. She had 2 master's degrees from the UK, had spent 20 years teaching in the UK, and yet they would not hire her in the same capacity as and she had, one of her master's degrees was from the Institute of Education, which you don't get. It's consistently any better than that. It's consistently ranked #1 in the world. And yet Lalitha couldn't get hired at the level that I could get hired, which I found horrifying, and she's Malaysian, with that. So I think that there's going to be some changes, and I think they're going to be, these international schools are going to be forced into this, whether they like it or not. And, the person that I'm working on collaborating with, he knows it too. So that's kind of like, all of this is very helpful, Heidi. So as we kind of work through this, I may be in contact with you, because I can see this whole thing. And it's one of the things that I've talked about actually with, is that it, comes down to the school owners and the parents. Right. That's where the problem lies.
Right. And I think Meadow brought that up too, that, they're paying clients. They think they can, because they're paying, they have rights to say what they want, and what they think should be in the schools. And I think, in reflecting on the first prompt of what makes me uncomfortable, is we do have to be prepared for those uncomfortable conversations, just like we do when we have a difficult teacher or difficult staff member. Those aren't fun conversations to have, but we have to have them. And like I said, accusing someone of racism is so explosive that we ourselves shy away from that, because we don't want to be accused of calling someone racist. And that's a hard conversation. We have to also be aware of ourselves, our own self-knowledge of that. What makes me uncomfortable during this, and how can I do this in such a way so that the parents realize what is happening too? Frankly, talking with them, but we have to be prepared for the fallout, that some parents will leave the school, that we will lose clients. Are we prepared for that? Are we prepared for that?
And as I've been reflecting through this whole thing, because my experience hasn't been as broad as most of you with the actual international schools, because I've been doing something that is a bit different, working with government kind of international development projects. But however, there is a twist to that is very similar. And I'm wondering, one way to work through this is that we've got to, as an expat, and if we're working alongside, like I had the privilege of working along so many talents, particularly like I have people that I worked alongside in the ministry, in that they're extremely talented people and educated. And they were educated from really like Australia, UK, US. I mean, you know, one of the schools that I was assigned as an education advisor for a year and a half. Well, the principal was educated in Texas. Okay, she's Malaysian, but she was educated in Texas. That's where they sent her for a master's degree. But what the disturbing part became was the service company that was contracting with the Ministry of Education there. So they hired expats, Western expats from, you know, every Western country, New Zealand, Australia, you know, South Africa, UK, Canada, United States. But what I found was so many of them would talk down to these Malaysian educators. And I've been in meetings more than once with these expats, and I would say, well, you know, we can have them do this and this. You know, I'm working alongside my, you know, my Malaysian partner and that. And they'd say, oh, Anne, they don't get it. They just like talk down about them. They don't get it. And I'm like, yes, they do.
Yeah.
I said, they do get it. They do. They can do this. So I think, and I found myself in a position where I guess I would stand up for them, and they could do it.
Not many people do.
I think that's what we have to do, even with parents and school owners, is we have to convince them. You've got, whether it's local talent or in an international school, you know, the educators of color, we somehow have to speak up more, particularly I think when we're coming from that white privilege educator, we have to speak up to whoever, and we have to actually start to convince or them that they are very capable, that maybe they look different than we do, but they are many times more capable. Just like my Malaysian colleague, Lalitha. I mean, she could speak Bahasa Malay. I couldn't. She by far, you know, I used to tease her. I'm like, you're by far a much better asset than I am. I mean, you know, with that, because I can't speak the language, but yet they wouldn't. And if she was hired in my capacity, it was at a much lower, that's the other thing. It was at a much lower salary, which was not right with that. And I think that we have to speak up for this more. And I think we have to start, I guess, doing a better sales job with this, with the educators and the school owners.
Yeah, and again,
Marla?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Heidi. I just have another question.
Oh, I was just going to reiterate that, again, pointing out what's in our hiring policies. It's all right there. What's in our mission statements, it's there. We have to show that and say, this is what we wrote. Do you or do you not agree with this? Yeah. Because this is what our school or our organization stands for. And by standing for that, this is what that means, that we will have people with different accents. We will have people with different colors.
But that doesn't mean they're any less competent.
Correct. Absolutely.
And I think that's what we have to, because somehow they
part of what we have to push.
The parents, the parents and the school owners somehow are convinced that there is this superiority. I mean, it was one of my first experiences.
Right.
Was actually, I think that was one of the things that my first experience was doing a short interim consulting with an international school actually in Qatar. And I was quickly humbled by the fact that I felt like I was immediately put on some pedestal that I shouldn't be on.
Right, right. Thanks, Anne. Okay. Brittany, sorry.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking in terms of people like Marla and others who are working, doing the work with the schools on making a part of this change. Like, you're about to enter a series of webinars, and I know that other people who have been, you know, invested in this process from way beyond this, when this became, you know, the explosion that it came about in the last few months. It might be nice to see if there is any work that's already been done, leveraging maybe some of the work that's been done in other countries around this whole concept of professional development for parents, that can be written and prepared in a way that would make it applicable for international schools. I don't know, you know, what that would look like, but I think it might be the moment to kind of, if someone kind of takes that on of doing that and saying, well, this is what we've come up with, and here's some resources that we've pulled together, and to move this to the next step of, here's a pack of tools that we think that would work well, and making that available in the process of things like Marla and others are doing when they start doing these trainings, that then they have a list or a pool of resources that they can say, this is one of the ideas that we would like to pitch to schools or to boards as part of fulfilling their mission in this work and this process that they're going through. It's just something I think that might be a worthwhile thing.
Good.
Yeah, Marla, would you consider sort of journaling your experience through this process, or once you've come through your 4-session seminar or series of workshops, writing up something about the experience, how it went?
Yeah, sure, of course. Because it's going to be ongoing work that I do with them. So even though I will do this series with them, I will be putting the educators in a group setting on Facebook so that they can continue to talk, and we can continue to discuss and do some one-on-one coaching with them throughout the whole process. Mm-hmm. So this is not like a group of series and then I'm done.
And then one time.
That is the issue. Yeah, that's the issue that a lot of times that we have when we're doing professional developments for schools or for professional developments for teachers. So this was the thing that I brought to the organization, and I let them know, if I'm going to be doing this, for me, this has to be an ongoing thing. Exactly. So once I do this for the teachers, I want to continue doing coaching sessions for them so that they can, it's not like, okay, now it's up to you to continue to do this work. Because a lot of times when you're finishing doing these sessions, yeah, they have the knowledge, but a lot of times it's the implementation of everything. And it's the talking to someone to be able to understand, okay, what could I have done better? Or this is what went well. These are the other resources that I may need. So, yeah, I don't mind writing it up, Meadow, at all, because this is going to be an ongoing thing once it starts.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. One of the things that, as you were speaking, teachers say, oh, this is wonderful, this is great, I have this good knowledge, but again, turning that from just a quick little PD and one little homeroom lesson, how do we rewrite that curriculum so that it's continuous through that curriculum? Because often teachers say, oh, I've got so much other content to teach. Well, if you're always looking at math questions that have Johnny and Susie in them, where's the Jose? Where's the Giovanni? Where's the Mustafa? Where are they selling apples? We need them also to be part of the math, even if it's as simple as changing the names in our math problems. It's so important that we do this in every step of our curriculum and not just say, well, I've got too much other stuff to teach. No, this is, what do we think is important? This is vital. More than math, more than social studies. This is the very basis of who we are. Kevin, one of the things that you said.
I was going to hop in too, Heidi. I think that, definitely what you're saying, that representation is big. And I think that's one of the things, talking with the founders of the organization to decolonize international schools, is what they're saying, is that in their journey, in their stories, and their learning, there was a lot that was left out. In terms of who we read, who we learned about, whose history we learned about, and what we didn't learn about. And this sort of belief that, we were under this umbrella of, everything around the world is, so well, when in fact, there was this discovery that, no, it's not. And so you're right. It's, now remember, being in schools that, we're looking to, how do we ensure that our scholars see themselves, in math, in science, in all the content areas, and making sure that the representation is there. not only of their own scholars, but other people, other people who they might not have interacted with yet. So how do we expose them in a consistent manner? And a big piece is curriculum, and looking at those questions. That was the one thing that I was going to hop in on. I'm part of like a STEM startup program at a school, and that was one of the first things we talked about was identity. How do we ensure that scholars see themselves, in this work, that it is not something that other people do. When we think about a mathematician, a scientist, who would they draw? Who would they visualize?
Yeah.
Making sure that they draw themselves, that the mirror is put to them, that if they say mathematician and scientist or someone doing STEM-based work, that they see themselves, which, for us is like this ongoing thing, not just us beginning of the year, but how do we infuse that throughout, and bringing that in consistently.
Kevin, when we first started talking about this, one of the things you said to me is making sure that this isn't just a moment, but that it's a movement. And that has just been resonating with me. I tell you, I mean, that's just been how I fall asleep at night. How do we move from a moment into a movement? And so, Marla, I'm so excited for you. I just send you all the encouragement I possibly can, that you just continue working with this. And again, it's not a checklist. This is so fundamental to who we are. I just want to send you all my encouragement.
Yep. And it's a big thing too. And I think part of what you said, because, in the article, I want to bring out this because I felt like this was one of the things that stood out. And I was like, I want to reach out to Heidi because I feel like, we definitely need to have a hosted discussion. You said, I'm gonna go down. It says, I believe parent attendance should be mandatory in at least one diversity workshop in order for their student to join the school. So she didn't hold back. She said, look, stop sitting here selling these parents, on this, to make sure that if you're going to say, if your school is adopting certain practices and policies, embed that in, and let's fully do this, not just saying, oh, at our school, we all hold hands together and they're so diverse, but no, how are we going to ensure that all stakeholders are part of this process? So,
and I think, thanks, Kevin. I'm so glad. Meadow, I know that you were saying there's going to be pushback, and I wonder about that too in terms of my North American glasses, because I'm an individual and nobody can tell me what to do, and we have that civil rights. Nobody can tell me to wear my seatbelt or whatever, and I think it's hard. Yes, we will have pushback. But do we believe what we say? Because if we believe what we say, if we believe what's in our policies, that's going to be our driving force. And maybe there's a nicer way to do it. I struggle myself with the forcing and the leading or nudging. And when do we say racism does not deserve a nudge? We need to force it. We need to say, this is unacceptable. It will not happen. And when do we say, did you just hear what you said? Let's look at that and analyze that in the idea that we have this international school. So my personal struggle is that, when do I say, stop it, just stop it? And when do I say, now let's look at what you said? So that's me. That's my struggle too.
And I think a school is much better placed to make impositions on its parent body if it is walking the walk itself. I mean, that would be key, right? Like, and so parents being key stakeholders, they need to come along on the journey.
Yes.
But what is the what is the order of operations here?
Correct approach, right?
The school, before you start imposing things on others, you really have to do that deep collective self-examination.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
And with that done, you'd be a whole lot more persuasive, I think.
Precisely. Yeah.
When working with a parent body and bringing them
yeah
bringing them around.
Yeah. And it can't, I had said, you know, we can't do this and just think it's done, which means that every year we need to focus on another aspect of it, or another person coming in to do the training, or a different type of training. It's not a one-time deal, and there's so many different facets of it, and what all we have to look throughout that organization, throughout that, the systems that we have ingrained. I mean, like Marla was saying, Kevin was saying, starting with curriculum, starting with representation. It's big, but we have to.
And to not do it is to do what? You know, is to maintain status quo.
And to allow it to happen.
Yep.
And that's.
Yeah. Because so many times, I can't count the number of times I've heard the elephant in the room. You know, that would come up quite often, you know, oh, the elephant in the room, or, oh, can't touch that, can't discuss that. It was just like, shoot away, shy it away. And again, it's one of those things that it's a constant, you know, and that's, again, behind why we started, you know, is advocating for people, advocating for change.
Can I ask like a broad, maybe, I don't know, somewhat naive question? Because, you know, much as I read about the international school sector, I'm not out there working in these schools myself. So, like, what is it that drives change in an international school?
You have to have people that are willing to. So, in the international setting, you have people who want the change. However, if you have certain people in the board, then you're always going to be overturned. It was like that for me when I was teaching in Nigeria. So I was working for the U.S. Embassy School, and the director who was there previously, he went on a mission of hiring people of color, because he said it can't. Now he was a person of color, or he is a person of color, and he said we can't have a school in Nigeria and all the teachers are white.
Yeah, good.
So he went on a hiring spree, and it was 8 of us who were Black Americans. Out of the 8 of us who were Black Americans, 2 of us, we are first generation American. So a girlfriend and I are, we're Jamaican American. Then you had 3 Latinos. One was a family with their children. Well, 2 of them, they were families with their children. So that was a huge thing. And parents didn't know how to react, whether they were Nigerian or non-person of color, because for all these years you had white teachers. If you had Nigerian teachers, they were either at the early childhood setting, or they were TAs.
Yep.
And a lot of your, like, when you have conversations with them, even the TA, a lot of them had masters.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're working on their doctorates. Yep. And this was the highest, like, if they left and went somewhere else to be an actual teacher, they would never make the same amount of money that they were being a TA at the school. Well, some things happened and took place where, like, we saw there was a lot of conscious biases and racism that was just coming up, and it was spewing out because the director, he left, someone else came, and I knew it was going to be bad when the first thing he said was, "I don't see color." Like, that, sir, that's impossible. Like, because when you see me, you see a Black woman. I mean, there's no way not see it. So you do see color. And his stance was, well, I'm from Canada and we don't see. And I'm like, have family in Canada. That's not truly accurate. So with his stance, it also brought about a lot of things within some of the white teachers, and they really started to show who they were. And parents really saw the difference between how a person of color treated their students versus a non-person of color. And before, they just thought, oh, the teacher was just being hard, where no, it wasn't being hard. They were being non-caring. And things that they were saying before, they realized it was true injustice. So there was a true uproar and uprising amongst the parents and the teachers. And a lot of us were given non-rehire letters because of it. I saw what was happening and decided to quit on my own because I don't want you to say, because the international world is really small.
Yes, it is.
And directors change. It's a old boys club.
Mm-hmm.
They can do things at other schools. If you see what's going on, you're finding out about several people who have done sexual molestation and a whole lot of other things, but they're being moved to other schools just because of who they know. And that is the issue. And it can't change until, you have people who are willing to cut the head off and basically start over and say, okay, forget your words on what your practices are and what you say you're going to do. You need to actually do it. Yeah. And until that is done, we're always going to have these conversations. We're always going to have an uprising of parents and students, especially now. Social media and change.org, they're calling these teachers out. They're calling these heads of school out on a daily. There are so many Instagram pages that are coming up because of the discrimination and anything else that may have happened in the schools. And students and parents and other teachers are speaking up now. Now, are schools actually taking action? I know some schools that are, but then I know some schools who are just, hiding their head in the sand and going on as business as usual. And they will be able to do that because, again, it's all about the money. If your parents want the school to look a certain way, they can threaten and say, we'll leave. If you don't have a head of school that is like, okay, well then go, you're always going to have these issues.
Spend time appeasing.
And I would go above and beyond that, Marla, because the head of school is hired by the board for most schools. And that's why when I started this conversation, I said that there's conversations about that. I know that at board level conversation, once you hear rumors that board level conversations are happening, you know that there's stuff is changing because boards hire school heads. They're the ones that perpetuate the old boys club. And I will also make this other statement, which is international schools are not all equal. We know
no, they're not.
They're run in many different ways. They're not associated to each other. We talk about them as if there's this network of them all being together. These are private, independent schools that happen to be in different countries around the world, who happen to be teaching in English, they are not affiliated to each other. They don't all have the same rules. They don't all have the same structures. They don't all have the same beliefs. They might have the word international in their title. That does not always mean the same thing to everybody. So I think we're looking at a whole, it's very challenging to kind of grouping all these things together in a big bucket, but you know, that's not always helpful. And I think we have to look at the difference between private, the non-profit schools versus the corporate schools versus the groups of schools. There's so many different types that come in with their different flavor.
Yeah.
But in all
and
of
there's
that,
different price ranges as far as
what parents are automatically attracted to which one in a country will also be a huge reflector of the morals and values that each one, or what they're seeking, the match they're seeking for, which I think you brought up, Heidi, in your presentation. So I think all of them have one thing in common: the head doesn't own the school.
No, you're absolutely right.
Heads, yeah, have certain like they're given leverage to do a lot. Other heads are not. So I think this is one of the reasons why, for me, during this last few months, it's been very interesting to see the accreditation process be analyzed and looked at, and starting to see some systemic changes there. Because if any school, regardless of all these different ones I talked about, loses its ability to become accredited without making some of these changes, all of a sudden the people at the board table wake up and are like, what, we can't get accredited? Now parents aren't going to want to come to our school because that's the little logo that we need to legitimize ourselves. Great. Mm-hmm. Great. Let's have a conversation about that, because that's what I would like. That's what we need to see. It needs to start from all these different prongs. And I think I like this conversation because often, if you've ever sat in or been witness to what's going on at a board level, again, boards are not all equal. No, some of them are amazing and they're running off of these incredible individuals. Others are just like, they can't be bothered. It's another one of the list. They're not getting paid for it. They're sitting there on this thing. They can't be bothered. As many things as they can dish off, keep it churning, keep the money coming in, and we're all happy and good. Okay. And so I think
many of them have parent boards.
Yes, right. Exactly. Or at least a percentage. Most have a percentage of their people are parent run, which is wonderful. Because then that would get into the professional development for parents. Right. Once you have a certain level of parent involvement on the board, it can be awful, it can be great. Because you're going to get the negative, horrible, horrible racist parents coming in there and coloring the board decisions. Or you get parents in there who are like, wait a second, let me just put my hand up and say, this isn't the education that I want for my kids. So that's why another reason why I feel like this role of parents, I mean, I just hope, and I don't know if that's Heidi who's taking on the mantle of just sitting there and saying, okay, I'm really invested in this. What's out there? What can we do? What are some of the tools? What can we hand over to boards saying, here's some suggestions. We know that this is coming down the pipeline. You're going to be asked these questions about social justice and what international means. How are you implementing your mission statement? Just here's some great things that maybe you can do for your parent committee or your parent environment to help you along that. So when it comes to signing off your accreditation, check, you're ready to implement some of those things. I think as a community, we're at that point where, I think we're all being called to take that next step. And what is it that we can contribute and where?
Absolutely. And Meadow, I'm just going to go, it starts with me. It starts right here. This is how change happens. It starts with those of us that are concerned about this and willing to say, this is enough. We're done. It starts right here.
Yeah, excellent. And so just circling back to my first comment, I think it would be wonderful to develop this as a running topic, because as we've spoken with Kevin and Joel and others about, if we can really define the areas of, the more we can together sort of home in on, like, what are these different pressure points within the international school sector, where we can really begin to push conversations and apply pressure and keep the pressure on, like then we have kind of a roadmap for mobilizing this wonderful sort of body of educators and people with a stake in anti-racism in the international school sector, and we can really begin to just organize ourselves such that, yeah, we don't drop any of these threads, because as we know, they're all interwoven.
Right.
And so yeah, I just want to, I'm excited, Marla, that you'd be willing to write something about this experience you're embarking on. And Heidi, if you want to really, just as Brittany was suggesting, like, what is out there? I mean, I'm actually leading a parent university for my district on New England's role in the slave trade and the economy of enslavement. So I'm going to be having that experience of a 2-session professional development, running a 2-session professional development for the parents of my district. So maybe I write something, even though it's, you know, based in the U.S. and it's in a public system. But in any case, I'll come out of the experience with some feedback for this particular conversation. And I hope
would like to hear that.
Feeding in, yeah.
Well, it looks like we've had loads of conversation about everything that's going on, and we've covered a lot of topics and questions from Heidi. Heidi, is there anything else you wanted to cover before we wrap up?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. I just so appreciate being part of this. Thank you for asking me and for joining with me in this. If I can help with anything else, please, I'd love to continue being part of this. So please let me know if there's something that I can help with. I can join.
Great.
Thank you so much, Marla. Thank you, Kevin.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We appreciate you being here. Thanks again for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Meadow, thank you.